voice, but I don't see. Oh, here I go. Mute. Hey. Okay.
Thank you. We are just about to start, Mr. Chair. I've just got us live on YouTube.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And one second here.
Yep.
All right. I think we're ready to go, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you so much. We'll call the Planning Commission to order this November 4th, 2020. If staff could call roll, please.
Dawn Daniels.
Here.
Connie Coleman-Lackady.
Present.
Ryan Pearson.
Here.
James Guerrero.
Here.
Nancy Hudson Eccles.
Here.
And Paul Wagaman is not on, but there is quorum.
He was on earlier, I thought.
Yes, he may be coming back, Mr. Chair, just so you're aware.
Yeah, no problem.
He's also shown as an attendee.
I'm promoting him to a panelist now. Thank you.
Yep, great, thank you. So before us, we have the minutes of October 21st, 2020. Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Mr. Pearson made a motion first. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Wagaman, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any discussions, changes to the October 21st, 2020 minutes? Seeing or hearing none at this time. All those in favor by saying aye or raising your hands? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes passed as written for the October 21st, 2020. Any updates or changes to our agenda tonight?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other, do we have any public comment at this time? We can open up public comment.
Ms. Devereaux, did you receive any public comment prior to the meeting?
I did not receive any, thank you.
All right. Hearing or seeing none at this time, we'll close the public comment. We'll move right to number 6. It's a community meeting for proposed Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan, the Development Code, and the Plan Action. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels, and members of the Planning Commission. Tonight we have 2 special presenters for you this evening related to the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan, which is the focus of the meeting. And what we're doing right now is an extra step, if you will, that is something that's required by SEPA as we look at a proposed planned action ordinance that's going to accompany the sub-area plan and development code. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica Rett and Lisa Greeter, who are from Burke Consulting, and they're going to take us through this process that's called a community meeting. And then as we get back to more of the usual pieces of the agenda this evening, they will also be assisting with the presentation on the plan itself and also the development code that's related. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Erica, who is now the host and who can continue the presence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Let me get my screen shared here. Okay. Hi, I'm Erica Rett from Burke Consulting, and I'm here with my colleague Lisa Greeter. We're going to give a presentation about the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan. And we're going to pause throughout the presentation to allow some time for questions and comments as we go through. So let's get started with this presentation. So tonight we are looking for feedback. What we want to know is what you think works about the plan and what concerns or issues do you anticipate. We're going to talk around 4 discussion topics, including the vision and key concepts from the plan, land use and urban design, housing, and utilities and infrastructure.
Erica, can
So
I
in turn,
really quickly? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Are you intending the members of the public who have reached out and are participating as the community plan, or do you want Planning Commission members to be the ones reacting to you, or both?
we can facilitate both, if that's okay with you.
Fine by me. I just wanted to make sure the Planning Commissioners knew that they could jump in as well.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so here we are with the planning process. In our planning process, we started with a project launch, and at each step, I basically have three steps along the way: the project launch, the draft plan, and the adoption process. And all of the documents that we produced are shown in red. They can be found at lakewoodstation.org. So you can go to the project website and find those documents and review them in detail. It's more than 100 pages of documentation, so we summarize it for you here tonight by going over the key issues. But we're happy to answer any questions that you have, and then we're also happy for you to look through the materials yourself. So in the project launch, we held a vision survey with the community. That vision survey happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, so that was held online with some outreach to the broader community. We also, just before the pandemic, held an in-person stakeholder workshop. And in the draft plan stage, we held a stakeholder workshop earlier, or actually, I guess it wasn't earlier in this month, it was late last month. We held a stakeholder workshop. We're having this community meeting tonight, and there will also be a public hearing that's coming up later this month. And then after we get some comments and review in the draft plan, we'll start to move on to the adoption process. So we're towards the end of the draft plan process here, and part of our project includes a sub-area plan, which is a policy and strategy-oriented plan for the development of the sub-area itself. It includes a hybrid form-based code, which will include, which would end up being changes to the Lakewood Municipal Code, and then it includes a planned action under SEPA. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk about the planned action.
Thanks, Erica. The planned action is a tool under the State Environmental Policy Act, and it's meant to facilitate growth by doing the environmental review homework up front. Then the growth that comes that's consistent with the plan and regulations doesn't have to repeat the State Environmental Policy Act process. SEPA was amended a few years back to allow for a threshold determination rather than a full environmental impact statement, especially for areas that are within a half mile of a major transit stop, and that characterizes our study area. So towards developing a threshold determination, we developed a SEPA checklist in September and posted that to the project website. We also sent early transportation results to the State Department of Transportation. Those results are also shared in the draft plan that Erica will go over a bit more later. One part of the SEPA process that Tiffany described is called a community meeting. So under the planned action process and under SEPA, there's a section that calls for a community meeting. It's a little bit of a misnomer because the invitation needs to be sent to agencies and tribes. And in addition, the city notified stakeholders about the community meeting. And the intent is to share an early draft of the planned action before it goes to hearing. So the next steps for the city are to issue the threshold determination and have a 14-day comment period. And then following that, there would be the legislative process that Erica described to review the ordinance, have a hearing and adoption. So the steps are down below in the diagram there. So we are one step from the left to have this community meeting. And then we go through the rest of the steps to issue the actual formal determination, the comment period, and then the legislative process. What that means at the end of the diagram there is, again, that planned action projects that are consistent with the provisions of the SEPA document and the sub-area plan and the regulations don't have to repeat that process. So Tiffany, I was thinking, since this is the community meeting part of the agenda and I've described the planned action, we could see if there's any questions and then maybe see if any of the questions from the Planning Commission, and then maybe see if there's any of the attendees who have questions.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, would you like to call for questions from people?
Yes, at this time, if there's any questions for staff or our presenters, we'd be more than happy to entertain any of those. Connie, did you have a question? You have to take yourself off mute, Connie.
We're doing, I had the question.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. Ms. Eccles.
How many people are on the meeting from the community that are participating?
It looks like there's 5 attendees.
Okay.
Besides the Planning Commission?
Well, and Mike Branstad is in there twice, so the 5 is really 4.
Okay. Thank you.
So do they,
Oh.
the other part of it, do they represent the tribes also?
I know that Carla Vinson is with Pierce County, Kira Pfeiffer is with Puget Sound Energy, and I don't know who Derek is. I'm not sure who he is, either a citizen or a representative of a group.
So the tribes aren't represented?
They were invited, but it looks like there's no one here in person tonight.
Okay.
It looks like Tiffany and Derek mentioned he's a developer.
Thank you.
So Lisa, I had a question. This is similar to the downtown sub-area plan, the same kind of process that we went through on the sub-area plan is getting the SEPA and the same steps is that correct? Is that similar to what we did before?
It's pretty similar, except that we could do a more abbreviated environmental document because we're within a half mile of a major transit stop.
Okay.
The Pierce Transit Bus Center did not count necessarily as a major transit stop. It's more meant for the larger systems.
Oh, okay. Okay. Does any other commissioners have any other questions? I don't. No, I didn't see Mr. Guerrero. Do you? Or Ryan? I don't see any, don't hear any, so we can continue on.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to start by introducing the vision of the project. So the vision is a slight update to what's been the long-standing vision for the Lakewood Station District since the first comprehensive plan for Lakewood was adopted. And when we did some of our vision outreach to the community, we found a lot of support for all of the key elements that have been the long-standing parts of the vision. And as you can see, I have the draft vision typed out here in its entirety, but a few of the key concepts include recognizing the station district as a multimodal commuter hub and creating around that hub an amenity-rich, transit-oriented development node. So that includes a high-quality pedestrian-oriented urban environment that would be a mix of commercial uses like medical office, regional and local retail services and hospitality, as well as high-density residential uses that importantly offered both ownership and rental housing opportunities. So we're going to talk about all these different concepts that are in the code. So let me go to the next slide. The first top concept I want to talk about is is transit-oriented development. This is the main thrust of the land use arrangement for the station district. It takes advantage of proximity to transit. In the concept map here, you can see what's shown in this concept map in the bold background colors are the underlying zoning. For the most part, we didn't make any major changes to the underlying zoning. There's in terms of where the zoning is applied within the district. And so in that brown area, which is the MF3, we're really looking at about 40 units per acre for residential development. And then in the red area, which is the transit-oriented commercial, we're looking at 54 units per acre oriented around mixed-use development. But in other commercial areas, and we would also be looking for opportunities to support live-work development, and of course, continued support for employment and business uses that exist within the corridor, and then also encouraging new employment and business uses in the corridor as well. So one of the things about the land use plan is that, so just a little bit about this presentation. I'm going to provide some key concepts, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the information that is part of the planned action as well. And so here in the land use, it's important to realize that the densities that we have identified for these areas are within the ranges that were identified in the comprehensive plan. Overall, and the land use plan includes the zoning that I just identified previously. It also includes some capacity built in for the development of the Lakewood Landing project, which is part of the sub area and on a similar development track with the overall development of the sub area. But because it's a master plan, it's developing a bit on its own track as well. So in terms of land use, we predict that the area has a residential capacity for about 1,172 dwellings and an employment capacity of about 1,276 jobs. So those capacities are ranges that we plan for within the planned action. It's also important to note that in order to support the growth of this area, we need to continue having coordinated planning for utilities and public services. We're within the ranges that the comprehensive plan identified, but we, to ensure that there is adequate provision of utilities, will continue to plan in coordination with utility and service providers. So I'm going to pause now and give the opportunity for people to ask questions. And also, if anyone would like to, just a couple of points of discussion, how sound do you think this approach is to transit-oriented land use in the plan? And are there additional measures that might support economic development? These are two questions that we are interested in discussing. I'll pause now and turn it over to the chair.
Thank you as well, Erica. Is there anyone that's on the call from the public that would like to comment or have any questions for our presenters?
And I think there's several ways they can identify themselves. I think they can raise their hand and they can also enter a comment in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to see Q&A. I don't see any comments on the Q&A myself. Is Connie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the commissioners could ask questions also. You asked.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So when you were talking about the mixed use, do we know what that looks like? I mean, is what the mixed use is?
So the mixed use could take a number of forms. So it could include a mixed use development that had ground floor commercial uses with residential mixed use above. And that may become, that might be a possibility for a master plan development like Lakewood Landing. It also might be a possibility for other developments within commercial areas. It's allowed in the transit-oriented commercial and also the other commercial districts. So we're not, I mean, we don't know exactly what that will look like, but the land use is set up to allow that use.
Good. Mr. Pearson.
So the ratio of dwelling units to jobs was like 1,100 to 12 something, like 100 off. That's the existing. Is that going to change a lot, or is that similar to what you guys would expect with areas like this sub-area plan? Are we going to see quite a bit of change with that ratio of dwelling units compared to jobs?
Erica, I can weigh in if you want.
I was gonna ask Lisa to answer that. Yes, thank you.
So the number of dwellings and jobs is not radically different from the current plan, but it is a little bit higher, and it is distributed a little differently because we made, the reason why it's a little higher is we made sure to consider Lakewood Landing and make sure that it was allocated to that site and other places. And because I think when Erica talks a little bit about housing later, we anticipate a pretty wide range of housing types, including townhomes. We didn't see that we needed to change the density that much in the area because the density was already supporting some transit-oriented development in proximity and allowing for both rental and ownership.
Thanks.
Mr. Guerrero.
Thank you. So the first question, as far as the approach to the transit-oriented land use plan, I think that's just fine. I did have a question about does the plan also look at kind of right-of-way versus private areas within the zone, or is that what I'm asking about specifically is on the north side of the railroad tracks, the city put in a really nice overpass to get pedestrians into that area, and it kind of drops onto a single street. And I'm curious about if there is or will be a plan as far as how people get from that point to the whole kind of area to the north and northeast and west of that junction, or is it really that we're relying on the right-of-way to take people from the train station to their houses or to the hospital or to wherever else?
I think that's a wonderful question, and it is something that we will talk about a little later in the presentation, if you don't mind holding that question, and then we can discuss it then.
Great. Mr. Wagaman, you have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is how sound is approach? To me, I think it's a sound approach. I mean, getting people to come in around where the train and get people to use that. The downside is we're going through now is with this COVID thing. If that sticks around, it doesn't help us. However, the other things I think that might be nice to help support this is as long as there's some good recreational areas and places for people to live. And I would think that this might be an area where we want to have not necessarily lower cost. That's probably not the right way to put it, but places where people could start out to live, so younger people, people just leaving college, because they're the ones that do the commuting. So if we do all those things, it sounds good to me. Yeah,
that also anticipates a little bit more of our presentation in terms of We will be talking about a variety of housing types and sort of targeting a more moderate income in this area. So thank you very much.
Any other questions that we have? Seeing none, I guess we can proceed.
I did notice, Mr. Chair, I did
Yes.
notice that there is a question answer in the question box that says, from a developer standpoint, can you elaborate as to what this new proposed Lakewood Station District sub-area will change versus what the area is designated now? Is it okay if I answer that question?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I just noticed it as well. And thank you to Derek Z that proposed this question. So go right ahead. Thank you.
So it is interesting because while many of the key elements of policy and policy direction have been basically on the books for a while since the first adoption of the Lakewood Comprehensive Plan. Overall, where this sub-area plan refines some of those concepts. So we see a few refinements in land use, housing, transportation, that type of a thing. But it's not really any sort of a policy change. I think the big change, however, for this sub-area is the fact that a lot of the existing development is not yet does not yet conform really with the type of vision that we have for the future. And so one of the interesting parts of the sub-area plan policy development really has to do with how do we transition this area from an area that is more auto-dependent, has a lower intensity of use, and how do we transition that land to a place where it's a little more consistent with the vision. The land use and zoning are basically the same except for a few changes in public lands where the area of the Lakewood Station has been changed to a public land designation, and the area of there was an area that was owned by Sound Transit whose designation also changed. So except for those few changes, the basic land use and zoning is all still in place, but the sub-area is really addressing that transition from the current use.
Great, thank you. And
okay, I'm gonna move on to the next topic.
Yep.
Okay, so in our discussion of the hybrid form-based code, we're going to touch on a few of the other topics that were brought up. So the hybrid form-based code, for those of you who have been following the progress in downtown or who were a part of the downtown plan, the development of the downtown plan, may remember that the city adopted a hybrid form-based code for the downtown plan as well. So that type of a code is being adopted or is proposed for adoption in this area as well. So that will provide some consistency between those two areas. But one of the nice things about the hybrid form-based code is that it's based on this streetscape typology framework. So development specifically is organized around the type of street. And you can see on our key concept map, there's, in addition to the big bold colors that show the zoning, superimposed on top, we have some different colors for streets that indicate which type of typology. So development standards are based on the type of topology that the property of the street where the property is located. By organizing around these typologies, it should give the area an identifiable look and feel. In addition, when we took a look at the possibilities of having open space or green space in this area, there wasn't a clearly identifiable area where you could put in a big park, for example. Now, maybe something like that could be possible with some redevelopment in the future. But we looked at our streetscape typologies as an opportunity to integrate open space and green space into the sub-area. In addition, we looked for opportunities to integrate open space and green space into the developments. And so you would see something like a major development like Lakewood Landing would have a central public plaza that would provide a public open space, for example. So let me go to the next slide. In the hybrid form-based code, it uses the underlying zoning controls the allowed uses in the area, the densities, and the height of buildings. But we would apply an overlay to the station, the Lakewood Station district that would apply form-based development regulations. Again, those are based on the typology, and they define the relationship between the buildings and the street. So no matter what kind of development goes in, if you have that uniform relationship between the buildings and the street, it creates a very pedestrian-friendly and a very unified look and feel, while still allowing for some variations. Again, it's compatible with the downtown approach. So let's take a look at some of these streetscape typologies. So in terms of residential streets, these are a typology that are mainly in place around that MF3 residential area that was shown in the big brown chunk on the map. And the interesting thing about those residential streets is that there's a great deal of variation in their size. So we have proposed a development standard both for a 60-foot right-of-way and an 80-foot right-of-way. But basically, in each of these residential streets, it focuses on making improvements to enhance the movement of bicycles and pedestrians. It doesn't provide any on-street parking in these areas. It also, as you can see, provides landscaping and greenery to enhance the feeling of the public open space. In addition to residential streets, there's a few identified green streets. Now, we've identified some potential green streets on our concept map. That would include, a green street would include Kendrick Street, which is the street that leads sort of on the back side of the railroad tracks that leads to the overpass, as someone was speaking to before. Also 111th and 112th, where the city already is invested in some pedestrian improvements there. And so the idea with green streets is that in addition to these functional features for pedestrian development or for pedestrian and bicycle movement, and there would also be basically treatments that would create a type of a linear park along those areas. So it would provide both functional and amenity features and an opportunity perhaps for additional open space. And going one step beyond the green street is the idea of boulevard concept streets. So the idea of a boulevard concept, these are streets that would connect beyond the sub-area. So we might consider boulevard streets that would connect between the sub-area and downtown, for example, and they would provide this basically a type of green streets treatment that would go even beyond the sub-area. So I'm going to pause here so we can talk a little bit about the form-based code. And again, we welcome your questions and comments about any of the subjects that you're interested in, but a couple of items that we highlighted for discussion was to get some feedback on the approach to the hybrid form-based code, and then also thinking a little bit about streets that might be ideal for green streets or boulevard streets. And to enhance that discussion a bit, I'm just going to go backwards in the presentation so that we can see this key concepts slide here that illustrates where we have identified, you can see the green streets that are identified here along Kendrick and along 111th. And then you can see the potential for residential streets in the MF3 area.
Great. So I'll open it up again to any questions or comments from the public. You can put in chat or talk or whatever. I don't see any other questions there. Does fellow commissioners have a question yet or a comment? Okay, so we'll go with Mr. Pearson first.
With those different street types, does the city have the right of way for both of those? Do they have 80 feet of right of way in some of these areas where you're looking to put those, or would that be would right of way be required along those corridors?
So in the concepts for green streets and residential streets, we recognize that there's variable right of way. And so we basically have a cross section that's meant to fit within the existing right of way. So there's some variation in the standard to accommodate the right of way that the city already has.
And Erica, could I jump in just real quick?
Please do so.
Thank you. Ryan and everybody on the Planning Commission, the areas where there is a potential for the 80-foot street design is because that is an 80-foot right-of-way. So there are a number of streets within this sub-area that are currently at an 80-foot right-of-way, not all of which is used, meaning there may be a street on it that's narrower than that, and so there's some undeveloped or unmaintained almost right-of-way width. And so as we move forward, that's why there's two different street designs being suggested. And there may be a situation in the future where the city decides to create open space along either one or both sides in addition to the formalized street and pedestrian areas. Or there could be something where a developer coming in with a project may want to purchase some of that right away beyond a 60-foot width in order to assist with whatever redevelopment project they have. So no, there's not going to be any need for acquiring right away for any of these areas. And there's a potential someday of actually some of them being vacated for redevelopment purposes.
Great, thanks.
Great. Commissioner Guerrero had a question.
Yes, thank you. So the area I was looking at specifically is when you come across the pedestrian bridge from the train station, drops you down onto Kendrick's, and then there's kind of a huge block of properties to the west specifically that what I'm thinking of is if the train really works the way we want it to and people don't have, they're really just going from the train station, then they're walking to their residence. Would there be an easy way to get there? And so, on your map, for example, that large red almost triangle downsheet on the left of the train station, I'm curious if there's any thought to getting access to that area, which looks to me like there's certainly some existing commercial along Bridgeport, but then looks like maybe there's multifamily that's existing in there, and I get that we would want it to hopefully redevelop at some point, but I guess I'm kind of asking, is there a thought to getting pedestrian access to the zone there so that the route to get to the train station isn't all the way down Bridgeport and all the way back, or way up north and then back down around Kendricks?
Yes, so the idea is that throughout the sub-area plan, there would be opportunities to have pedestrian improvements that throughout the area, whether or not there's redevelopment. And in addition, we know that in some of the plans for that Pierce Transit and Sound Transit have made, those plans include pedestrian and bicycle-oriented improvements specifically to help get people to and from the station. So it wouldn't be just the street typologies that may be resulting in pedestrian improvements. There would also be improvements targeted by the city and both of those agencies to improve walkability and connections to the station.
Erica, it might be good to reference that site that Commissioner Guerrero was pointing out. I believe it's like an old brick plant. And my understanding is there's someone who, no, over to the left, right next between the blue and the green street, there, that there's been some land assembly that someone's been putting together and an intent, I believe, for some mixed use development there. And the MF3 already allows, when you're within a proximity to the station, to be able to do residential plus a bit of non-residential use, like commercial. So we have carried that idea forward in the growth assumptions. And Tiffany, I don't know if there's anything more to share with that.
No, that's a pretty good summary. Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Oh, Mr. Weigeman.
Yes. I mean, I like this walkable streets, or, you know, I don't know what all the things you're talking about there, but if people lived in that area and they're commuting on trains, you know, what do they do in those open spaces? But have we, you know, when we did the Colonial Center, we wanted to look at that as a destination place, but so we've got that place often part of the city. We have the city proper, the main street, and now this, and then we also have this, when it gets finished, being able to walk around Gravelly Lake. So is there any thoughts as we put these things together of how do we have nice walking paths to kind of connect all those areas together? You know, so if somebody wants to do a long walk, they can maybe hit all of those areas or back and forth. And then that certainly, from my perspective, if people are walking or using it that way, certainly the coffee shops or places to eat, those things pick up. So those are kind of my thoughts when I look at this.
I think that's a great, oh, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the city's legacy parks plan is meant to tie areas together, and this area was identified as a gap area for parks. And because, as Erica mentioned, there's not a lot of available land for parks, we're trying to get it through the green streets. Lakewood Landing would be a plaza area. And then I think, Erica, maybe on an upcoming slide, in that on the northwest portion of our study area, there's like a white street that's not colored in. It's really an alley, and it's identified on our a later map I think you had, Erica, as like this opportunity to create more of a green space or gathering space there.
I think if you can see my cursor, I think I'm pointing to the area right now.
Yes.
This alley space here.
So in the draft plan and form-based code, there's like a diagram that shows what that, I think a photo and maybe a diagram of what that could be like.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing Don't see any others. So and I don't see any questions from the public. So if so, you can continue on.
Okay, I'm going to go back to where we were in the presentation here. I just wanted to loop back so we could take a look there. I think before, I do see one
question.
comment here.
Just came in from Mike Brandstetter. You want to go ahead and read it and answer?
Oh, sure. Could an extended Green Street or Boulevard Street reach out from the sub-area to Lakeview Hope Academy, where some open and public amenities exist, perhaps Kendrick or Klein? I think that's a great suggestion, and we can take that into the comments for consideration.
Yeah, great.
It could be a really nice part of some of the connections that would extend beyond the sub area and closer to downtown as well.
Yeah, and that was Mr. Brandstetter. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
So I have a slide here about parking ratios, and parking ratios are something that we have done lots of thinking about in the development of the sub-area plan. So what you're seeing on the slide is a proposed table that shows the parking requirements for the sub-area plan. So one of the interesting things about the area is that we know that the area is auto-dependent at this time, and at some point in the future, the idea is for the area to become less auto-dependent. So we've done some thinking about how you transition an area, and one of the big issues has to do with where and how much parking is provided. So these are fairly low parking ratios. And a couple of other things to consider is that the development of parking has a major impact on the overall cost of development. So the requirement to build off-street parking, for example, can significantly affect the affordability of residential development. And one of the objectives of the plan is to have really good housing affordability. It can also, not just in residential development, but it can also affect the bottom line or the feasibility of all types of development, including commercial development or mixed use development. We also have small parking ratios proposed here because the area is within half mile of the station. So ideally, people would be able to share or would be able to utilize the station as for transportation, and whether they're employees coming into the area or people who live in the area. And so less parking would be needed because we're supporting a transit-oriented environment. In addition to the station, there's also a Pierce Transit bus facility within the sub-area, and we'll see some plans for expanded bus rapid transit facilities when we talk about transportation a little later on. So we're thinking about parking ratios here, and we've proposed some fairly minimal parking ratios in order to preserve affordability and to start to transition into a station area plan. However, as you may recall from the street state typologies, we were also looking at areas that would have minimal off-street parking. So I'm going to open this question up for discussion. What kind of supports do you think are needed for adequate parking as the area transitions away from auto dependence? So part of the idea here is that we would propose to have some of these minimal requirements for parking, but we may need to have some additional, need to have some additional supports in place so that there's adequate parking as the area develops. So we're interested in thoughts that you have about parking within the sub-area and transitioning parking within the sub-area.
Any concerns, Mr. Guerrero?
So on the previous slide, your parking requirements are a little lighter than we would typically see, and I'm personally in support of that. I think we over-designed for autos, but being a suburban area, of course, we're really reliant on cars. But I think the intent of this area is that we want to really promote the mass transportation. So I think starting with those numbers is appropriate. We're lowering them, but we're saying we still know we need cars. But ultimately, I would like to see us moving away from cars entirely in an area like that. And I realize it's probably too soon. But my thought is that hopefully in the near future, whether it's 5 or 10 years or 20 years, it may be that we go to a more of a car sharing model, and we really don't need the space for so many cars so many kind of permanent spots for cars. And so I guess my question is there are we building into this code the mechanism for parking studies to deviate from the required amount of parking?
So I think that some of the things, so I'm not actually sure, and maybe Tiffany could answer the question about what's allowed in the underlying code in terms of studies that would allow parking reductions or whatnot. But I know some of the things that we're looking at here would be looking at the availability of shared parking, for example, to be able to reduce parking requirements between uses that could share parking or areas that could share parking. That's one of the things that we are trying to incorporate.
And I'll just jump in with a brief answer, Mr. Guerrero. First of all, if this is a process that is available elsewhere in Title 18A of the code, meaning there's the ability to, or the Public Works codes, I'm sorry, regarding transportation analysis, if that is something that's allowed elsewhere in the city to create your own study justifying a different parking ratio, for instance, then that would be allowed here as well. We are, as you can see from tonight's presentation, moving toward having a new chapter within Title 18. It will be 18C. So if you remember, there was an 18A, which is the big one. There's 18B, which is the downtown code, and then 18C will be for this sub area. If we need to make reference within 18C to that process that's already available elsewhere in 18A, we will. But the other thing that I wanted to throw into the conversation is, as Erica mentioned at the start of this topic, this has really been the focus of the conversation within the city's staff, trying to figure out this policy, because it's a competing one almost, where you've got the development cost coupled with the idea of, hey, we're in a station area, we are promoting mass transit, and so why would we be allowing lots and lots of auto parking? But on the other hand, with the affordability needs within this area and the fact that you've got the demographics that live there currently and the types of jobs that are available there currently, it needs to be recognized that those people often will have more than one car per household, because you have people needing to work or have multiple people working in order to afford where they're living. So it's, do you allow for the parking that they may need right now in order to keep themselves employed and also in their homes that they have, versus this idea of we're trying to change this area over time to become more of a transit-oriented area of the city. So that's why we're really hoping to get some feedback from you tonight about which policy we follow in the short, mid, or long term. Is there a way to coordinate those two competing policies or what have you? So with that, I'll stop.
Yep. So I do have a question, if I could. So this is also for economic development. We're going to have some retail. So we're going to have some some citizens that are going to these businesses as well. So there is going to be, cars outside of the area where the people live. There's going to be, naturally, that's what the businesses hope, that other Lakewood residents are going to support. Or the also coming in on I-5 to get off I-5, head to this area if there's some services available. So there is going to be some parking issues still, even though we try to promote for the using the public transportation available for the residents. But to make that have those businesses be supported and to prosper, they are going to need the other mobile transportation of residents using cars to support those businesses as well. So I don't know what the formula is to have enough, it is sad to see some of our businesses with huge parking lots that, are just sitting vacant land and not being used. And the other token is there's been some times where I go and you have to circle the business, 5 times to find a parking spot as well. So it's a catch-22. And I think if you want the service, I guess you'll make sacrifices and park wherever you can find. So,
Raise your hand.
okay.
Well,
Ready, Ms. Eccles?
And I think one of
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the main ideas of transition is that we create within the parking requirement adequate parking so that existing uses are supported and they have the ability to park cars that come in from outside of the sub-area in all the ways that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the idea is that as the area grows and development intensifies, so as residents are added to the area, the residents are also supporting those businesses and supporting new businesses, but because they have the ability to come without a car, you kind of get this snowball rolling of having more residences that can support more businesses. And so providing some minimal parking is one way to help get that ball rolling. I think the tricky part of the policy is how do we support that and then allow areas to transition. So some of the things that we have included are, for example, maybe having shared parking areas or shared parking lots, and then as that parking becomes not necessary, as more people, as businesses and places are able to thrive with less parking, then maybe parts of those areas could be open for new development or expanded development. But you're right, it is a bit of a thorny issue to keep things going and support the redevelopment at the same time.
Right. Ms. Connie Coleman-Lackady or Ms. Eccles, did you have a question?
Well, more of a statement than a question. So you're telling me I'm gonna live in this little area and I'm gonna get on mass transit to get to my job and get back, which is fine. And then I get home and then I get to shop in this little area because I don't live in New York City. So there's not restaurants, there's not movie theaters, there's not everything in walking distance. So I either A, have a car that I have to get into. And by the way, my teenage son is with his girlfriend at the other end, at the north end, and he has to drive there. So I at least need 2 cars or I can't go out to dinner that night. I just don't understand how that's going to work in Lakewood.
And what about the people coming off the freeway that want to stop at these businesses to shop on their way down to the next place, but they have no parking, just like Dawn said, you just circle around and circle around to try to find a parking spot.
We're just confused on that vision.
So I think one of the important things to remember is that if we go back and we take a look at those parking ratios, even with the minimal requirements that there are being proposed there, it doesn't necessarily call for all people to be carless there. So there would still be requirements for a parking for each dwelling unit. There's still requirements for parking for the different types of commercial uses and things like that. One of the interesting things about a transit-oriented development district is that, I use the analogy of getting a snowball rolling. And what you do is that happens a little bit at a time, where you might have a development, say a master plan like the Lakewood Landing, come in and start to put some amenities so that there are some places that people really want to go within the sub area, such as restaurants or entertainment or open space. And so you create those types of things that attract people from the area and some people from outside of the area. And then that creates something that maybe more people want to live close to, or people who are getting off work will stop and use those areas. And the idea is that it builds up a little by little until you get a situation where there's this critical mass of sort of restaurants and shops and entertainment and services, so that the reasons that you would need to leave the area become fewer. But when you do, there would still be the availability to have vehicles. If you live there, you could have a vehicle. If you were coming to visit the shops, you would have a vehicle. That's how the concept works in practice, and you can. And it just takes a little bit of time to get the ball moving, but to the idea of like that's how the concept works. It doesn't go from being a place where everyone has to get around with a vehicle to a transit-oriented place overnight. It happens little by little.
So is this your first time proposing this? Did any of the developers and stuff, I noticed Mr. Guerrero, our architect, likes this concept or likes these ratios, so to speak. But, I'm not in that arena, and I just don't know if this is feasible, or is it, we're going to put this in here and then all of a sudden we find ourselves with absolutely no parking, or we have wasted areas with, but like you said, is we could take, Erica, that we could take those unused areas. If we see that happening with unused areas, that could be developed and used for future use.
That could be it. Erica, I might jump in a little bit here and say what we heard from our stakeholder group meeting late last month. So I think some of the folks involved in Lakewood Landing would like to see a slightly higher residential rate, at least for their development, like 1.25. On the other hand, I think back to Commissioner Guerrero's comment, we did hear from some other developers about the cost of parking for affordable housing. The State Growth Management Act was amended in the last year to give some maximum ratios for affordable developments, senior housing, and even market rate when you are very close, within a quarter mile of a transit station. So I think, Eric, it's fair to say we will probably bring back to the Planning Commission a couple of refinements or ranges to consider that are still similar to what you're seeing here, for residential, but just sort of take into account your conversation plus the stakeholder group
Great.
feedback.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? I see no other comments. Great, so we can continue. Oh, Mr. Wegeman.
Well, Brian's trying to get in too, but on this parking thing, to me, if you looked on the periphery of the area and looked at some areas where you could have like a satellite parking lot, but then going back to my comment on the last section we were talking about, as you look at all these places in total, as you want to maybe make a pathway or a roadway or a walkway to one of the other areas, look at places along there where people could keep autos for this short period, and as those spaces aren't needed anymore, then it turns into development, or some kind of thing. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Mr. Pearson, did you have a question?
Yeah, kind of comment to add on to yours. I generally agree with your comment. The parking numbers seem a little bit low for Lakewood. I get the idea, trying to reduce it and come to work towards an autoless kind of area, but I just don't see that happening as much. If it ends up being a great place, I think what you would end up with is something similar to like some of these areas in North Tacoma where you actually are getting people driving, coming in there to go eat and to go to these different amenities and things, and kind of similar what happens up there is you have parking's a nightmare and you can't even find any parking, and then you have people parking down streets, which and maybe that's something that you could get some parking, add in like a third street section that does include some street parking in some of these side streets, not the main streets, but maybe some of these side streets you can accommodate some more residential parking. So I do think that the parking numbers are a bit low for Lakewood, given just kind of the area.
Great. All right, we'll continue on.
Thank you. I really appreciate all those comments in the discussion. Okay, we're going to talk about another key concept, which is maintaining the area as an affordable place to live. So in our situation assessment, we looked at the existing conditions, and what we found is that amongst residents who are in the area, they're living at, the current residents in the area have low or moderate incomes. So basically at about 80% of the median income or below. And so we know that one of the things that people love about this neighborhood right now is the ability to have some place to live that they can afford. And we also heard that people liked having some green space and some open space around their homes. So we really wanted to maintain this area as an area that supported ongoing housing affordability. So a couple of things that we are trying to encourage with the sub-area plan. One is within the MF3 area, the brown area there, we're really looking at how we can encourage row housing. And we picked row housing specifically because it can be developed at the densities that are anticipated by the zoning there, which is around 30 to 40 units per acre. It can be built for both ownership or rental, because the units usually have an entrance at the ground level so that they can be platted to be attached, but still platted fee simple lots. They can be built out of wood, which is the cheapest construction cost, but still provides a really solid product. So there's a lot of reasons why we were thinking about row houses as a preferred type here. We also look at the ability to have a variety of different types of units. And so we've allowed units such as duplexes and triplexes, which may or may not be in a row house format. And then throughout the area, we've allowed stacked flats, live-work units, and mixed use, as I mentioned before, in the land use. So some of the variety of types that we would encourage to meet people's needs include those stacked flats or apartment buildings, mixed use, live-work, and row houses. And then we've really looked at what the policy direction is to support housing affordability and also to minimize displacement. So one of the things about the area is that there's a lot of room for new development. And what that means is that as new development occurs, there's adequate space to replace development as it's being built. So that's one of the things that favors minimizing displacement. Also, the city already has a housing incentive program that would be in effect in this area. And so we might look at ways that we could support or reinforce housing incentives in this area in line with that existing program. One of the ways we can support affordability is by addressing parking costs. That's something we just talked about in the last discussion. But you know, we've heard from people who work with development, and especially development of affordable housing, that if you need to basically build a house for the car, a place to house your car before you build the house for the people, you're adding significantly to the cost of the structure. We're possibly looking at extension of the multifamily property tax exemption. And I already addressed this last point about replacing existing housing as sites redevelop. So the goal is to maintain the area as an affordable place and allow opportunities for people with low and moderate incomes to continue living in the sub-area. So I'll pause here for a bit of discussion, and we'd love your feedback on this approach to housing affordability and any other approaches that you think should be considered.
Mr. Wegeman?
Well, I've doorbelled a lot of spots in the 28th district, which goes all the way down to Roy. And so you get a lot of people out in the Graham area, and the reason they like it out there is because it's affordable. But what they don't like is there are no buses out there, and there's none of those kind of things. So I thinking having clusters of these kinds of places in our community is a really a good idea and a good concept. My mother's an Australian. I was born in Australia, and they're very rural, but they can, as people get older, they can't get around as well, and so living in rural areas doesn't work. So what they've done is they've put lots of senior places that are clustered like this. So, what we have is the people that are going to Seattle, they're living down here and working out of Seattle for one of the big companies. So trying to meet all those needs is I think is the right thing to do. And if people feel comfortable, I guess the other thing, as we do this, will we have medical facilities that are close? I mean, St. Clair is not that far from this, so there's a piece, and will we add some more things like that to help those folks? So I kind of like what you're doing, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Mr. Guerrero, do you have any comments?
So I do like the approach. I am curious. So specifically related to the row houses, that does make sense, but it's still, the zoning still allows for other types of housing there. I'm assuming, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
It does, yes.
Yeah.
So it allows for a variety of housing types. And it allows any of the existing development to remain. So, but it encourages the development of housing types like row housing or other housing that would be at densities of 30 to 40 units per acre.
And if I could jump in as well, Mr. Guerrero, just a reminder that in the downtown sub-area plan, there was a lot of rezoning and upzoning and that sort of thing that happened in order to encourage development of a recognizable, this is here downtown for the city, right? Lakewood Station area, it's using the zoning that's in place already and making changes to the development code requirements in order to allow for development to happen at the maximum densities allowed already by the current zones. So it's a slightly different approach. And hopefully the result that we're bringing to everyone is that more flexibility is allowed, more incentives are allowed and present in order to maximize the allowable densities within this sub-area.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Tiffany. That's a great addition.
Yeah, great. That it looks good to me as well. I think they're could be well supported. Mr. Boki, did you have a question?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, no problem. You were just adjusting your camera or something up there. Didn't know if your hand was up, so great. All right, continue on.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about really are the type of transportation improvements that I alluded to before in response to some of the comments that Mr. Guerrero made. And one of the key concepts is creating this area as a walkable area. So one of the things that we do to try and support walkability in this area are the streetscape approach that I talked about in the urban design section, but also a series of non-motorized improvements that are really geared around connecting people to and from the transit station and major areas within the study area. And then also creating places that you want to walk to. So getting that land use snowball going where you have places that people want to go and walk within the study area. So in terms of transportation improvements, a number of improvements are already proposed, including some pedestrian and bicycle improvements that are identified to go in around the station. Some signal timing improvements to improve the flow of traffic in the area. Sound Transit has a system access fund that's identified a fund for pedestrian and bicycle improvements to provide access to and from the station. And then the Pierce Transit Destination 2040 has two planned bus rapid transit improvements. One would add a new route that would go to and from downtown Tacoma, and the other one would put a bus rapid transit route in place of an existing, I guess, regular bus route that would connect between this area and Puyallup South Hill. So a variety of transportation improvements are already on the books that will help create and reinforce this area as a transportation hub and make it easier to get to and from the transit facilities for the station district. We also took a look in terms of mitigation. So we've looked at the proposed growth in employment and and residential capacity in the area. So we looked at those growth numbers and ran the transportation model. This was work that Farron Piers, who is a transportation consulting firm, and they're working with us in the city. So we took a look at the growth numbers and also where the growth is proposed to go within the sub area, and looked at, so how is the area performing now? What would happen if at the full build out, which is the alternative one, and then what would happen if there was full build out and we added a few mitigation measures. So there were 3 identified intersections at Pack Highway and Halcyon Road, which is shown here in this orange dot, and then two different ones, Pack Highway and Bridgeport Way, and then Bridgeport Way and the southbound I-5 ramp. So you can see those dots down here on Bridgeport. And in those areas, under the no action, Pacific Highway and Halcyon Road, that is a failing intersection right now. It would continue to be failing, but with some mitigation, which includes some signal timing. Here, we could significantly improve flow of traffic there. If we're looking at these intersections or these near Bridgeport Way here, right now it's a level of service D, and unmitigated, without mitigation, it would fall to a level of service E, which, we all know that it's, especially down, in the peak times, it's, there is some delay at this intersection. It would get worse under the alternative if it was not mitigated, but with mitigation, we could bring it back up to about the level where it is now. So, in terms of transportation improvements, we believe that there's adequate mitigation measures to keep traffic flowing through this area, even as it continues to grow, and with the support of the other improvements that are proposed for the area. So the last question that I have for discussion is, what do you think about this approach to transportation and improving walkability within the sub-area?
Any questions from fellow commissioners? Mr. Pearson?
I generally like the approach. Is it, so your mitigation for the Bridgeport intersection on I-5, that's even doing mitigation, there's no way to make it better than level service D? Or is that, at some point, I guess the costs just get too ridiculous, or is it just not feasible at all?
Well, the mitigation that's proposed there, if we take a look at these mitigations, it really has to do, these are all things related to changing some of the timing of the signals, coordination of signals, optimizing the lengths of the cycles. So these are important mitigation measures, but they wouldn't include heavy capital investments. So whether or not some heavy capital investments could, improve it beyond the level that it is now, that's a different kind of question than we were trying to ask.
Thanks.
Mr. Guerrero?
Oh, sorry.
Yep, Mr. Guerrero.
The traffic modeling you were doing is based on a complete build out of the system? Is that, so it's based on 1,000 new residences and 1,000 new jobs in the area?
Yes, it's based on those growth figures that I mentioned at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a slight typo in one of them. There's more like 1,700 jobs, or rather 1,700 dwelling units. I think there was a transposition, but regardless, it is based on those numbers in the context of the city's overall model that includes downtown as well. So everything that is planned is in that model. And so all we did was adjust the growth numbers for this for this area.
Yes, Mr. Guerrero, go ahead.
This may be a little premature, but has there been any discussion of traffic mitigation fees associated with developing in this area?
We didn't feel like it was necessary. If we go back to that other slide, Erica, there's the city is planning to, I think in a future transportation improvement program, put the signal at Halcyon in the tip, and then the rest is based on signal timing improvements. So it didn't seem like, as Erica mentioned, like a heavy capital investment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. Any other questions for in the public, or I don't see any questions in the chat or questions and answers, but given the opportunity, if anyone has any other comments or questions. Okay, seeing none or hearing any other follow-up questions, does this end your presentation then, Erica? And is that what you're saying?
I just have a little bit of a next step slide if the comments and questions are complete.
Yes, I believe they are at this time. I don't see any other questions from fellow commissioners or the public. So go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to those members of the public who are observing and who asked some questions and made some comments, as well as to the Planning Commission for your really thoughtful questions and discussion. I think it was really great for the advancement of the plan. We're right here at fall 2020 with a draft sub-area plan and planned action. We'll be moving through a review of the plan and the planned action, including both of these things include the hybrid form-based code as well. It's the three documents are really the three legs of the stool for the plan. So we'll be moving through there and then on into a final sub-area plan after the first of the year. So we're really right in the middle of this process, and we're looking forward to comments that we may receive at the public hearing so we can continue to make improvements. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Erica and Lisa. You know, we appreciate the efforts and your presentation. Very informative, and I think that will conclude that portion of the presentation. So thank you both. And now we go to, on our agenda, we have no unfinished business and there is no public hearing tonight. So new business, Ms. Spear, I think, is this a typo? We got the same exact thing as what we just listened to.
No, I don't think there needs to be any additional discussion this evening, sir. But this was just the way it's on the agenda was to allow for that SEPA process to happen like it was supposed to. So I don't think Erica or Lisa have anything else, and I don't have anything else. You guys have provided a great set of feedback comments for us to work with and prepare for the public hearing.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move to reports, and Mr. Boki, do you have any reports tonight? Nothing?
Gotta unmute.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's late, so I won't go into a lot of detail, and I don't know that I have any other council business much since we're still working on the budget. But I do want to take the opportunity to mention to you about the restaurant rally, and it's actually use of CARES Act dollars from the county, and the county council put the program together, and it runs from November 8th through 19th. And you can go on the Pierce County Restaurant Rally. That's all one word, Pierce County Restaurant Rally.com. And you can see what restaurants, and the last time I looked, there were about 7 restaurants in the city of Lakewood that were involved. There may be more. I think the cutoff was yesterday or the day before, something like that. So and you should be able to get a discount. They've all agreed to do some kind of discount, and then they get reimbursed. And the idea is, and they've changed the rules a little bit. It was dine in, now it's dine in, take out. They've changed some of the things, but it's really the goal is to encourage people to go back in or to order from our local restaurants and kind of help them out in this very difficult time for them. So it's starting
Sunday.
Thank you. Sunday, and runs through the 19th, Thursday the 19th. So take advantage of that. And please take a look at our local guys in there.
Yeah, I see there was over 300 restaurants that had signed up on that thing yesterday. But yeah, support the Lakewood establishments as much as possible. And you can go as many times as you want. It's a 30% discount, excluding tax or alcohol, but includes any beverage and food. So it's a great deal for consumers, as well as supporting the local restaurants in our community. So any other staff? Tiffany, do you have any other reports?
No, sir. Just one more statement. That next meeting, which is on the 18th, will be a public hearing for the Lakewood Station. And then you will have December 2nd to go over the comments that you may have received and any testimony from that night. And then if you're ready to, you could take action on December 2nd. Or there is the ability to have a December 16th meeting should you feel you need that. And then this document, or document package, I should say, would be moving on to council.
Great, thank you. Any reports from commissioners, fellow commissioners? Any comments? Miss Connie Coleman-Lackady.
There you go.
So I just wanted to say, are we meeting before Thanksgiving, did you say, Tiffany?
The next meeting is the 18th, which is the week prior to
the
Thanksgiving.
Community meeting. Okay,
Yeah, public hearing.
public hearing. I was going to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, but I'll do it next week. I mean,
Okay. Thank you. Next
You guys
2
were
weeks.
chit-chatting there and missed that statement, huh? So you had
Yeah.
that.
I know. Yeah.
Meetings are hard at home.
bye.
All right, no problem. Well, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.